Hello, and welcome to TBI Talk. This is a podcast that will be a place to connect a community where its members probably would never willingly want to sign up. If you don't already know, TBI is an acronym for traumatic brain injury, and we're going to talk about it here. If you yourself has had a TBI or someone that you love has a TBI, then you've entered upon a journey that you never planned on. Life was interrupted to some degree, and in some cases entirely. It's very likely that if you've happened upon this podcast, you're in a disorienting place of being overwhelmed with emotions, many decisions to make, and in a very real sense, you feel alone, even if there's lots of people around you. Who can possibly understand what you're going through? Well, maybe I can. I want to introduce myself. I'm your host for this podcast, and my name is Lindy Boone Michaelis. And I include my maiden name, Boone. I don't usually, but many people will know and remember my father, Pat Boone. My dad was a singer, entertainer in the 50s, a contemporary of Elvis Presley, and they both got their start around the same time, almost identical timing in the music industry in the same year, and they both exploded with hit records and huge fan base essentially at the same time. If my dad had a number one hit record on the charts, he might be replaced by Elvis with his number one hit, and they would toggle back and forth for many years, as he tells me. I grew up one of the four daughters of Pat and Shirley Boone. So a little bit about me. I've been asked all my life, what was it like to grow up the daughter of a famous celebrity? And I would always answer, well, it seemed very normal to me since that's the only life I knew. And I liked it just fine. When you live in Beverly Hills, too, you aren't too far away from other kids of celebrities. So for me, it wasn't odd at all. It was nice. And the first quarter of my life was really charmed. As I said, I grew up in Beverly Hills with a tight family in the entertainment world. I have three sisters, and we were stair-step kids. Only 1 year between each new addition to the family. In fact, there's literally only 3.5 years between the oldest and the youngest of us. And I'm the second of the four girls. Music was big in the Boone house, as my dad was known as a singer, and he was a teen idol first, and later he did movies, and then he had his own couple of variety shows. But always music has been his first love. And throughout my childhood and teen years, we had buses taking tourists on movie star tours past our house all the time. I'd be looking out the window and people would be looking up at our windows. And I got really used to it. We never went out without my father being recognized. And from my perspective, he was loved. And by osmosis, so was our family. Our lives were very public, but we also had strict parents. We went to church 3 times a week, had chores. We got allowance. We went to an all-girls school. When we started entering our teen years, my folks both decided to put us in the show. First in Japan, when my dad was on tour, and his opening act was the Osmond Brothers. So he just thought he'd bring us girls along, and it was a perfect fit. And it went really well. So next, he decided to plug us into some of his shows in the United States, starting with Las Vegas. 2 shows a night at the Fremont Hotel. Anyway, he was just half joking when he would say he was determined to keep his teenage girls moving targets. And he wasn't really joking. My mother also had a famous father in the country music world. His name was Red Foley, very famous in country music in the Grand Ole Opry. And then my mom's mother also sang with her sisters. So it was natural for my mom to teach her 4 daughters to hear harmony and sing together. We loved singing, and we really enjoyed being in the show with our mom and dad. We learned our songs and our choreography, and we had our costumes. We really enjoyed being able to be in show business, but with the safety of both parents with us. And we also were getting a wonderful education, both in school, but through our travels. The deal was that if we kept our grades up, we could still sing and travel. And we did all summer long, and often interrupting our schoolwork and our school year. And if our grades would drop, then we wouldn't be able to keep doing it. So we worked really hard to be able to continue to perform and be a family act. My sisters and I got to record as a girl group and never had a big secular hit. We kept trying, but we also did record some contemporary Christian music that did pretty well. In fact, we did get nominated for a Grammy for one of our albums. And also, the opening and closing music for this podcast is a record that we recorded back in 1979. I looked that up and I couldn't believe it. It's 44 years ago, that song that brought us into the podcast. It's called Sisters and Brothers. And I just thought this was a really good song, being that it's from my family. We recorded it, but the message of it even has more meaning to me now because it's talking about walk together, little children. We don't have to worry. Through this world of trouble, we got to love each other and take your fellow man by the hand. And that's what we're doing with this podcast. We're walking together. To continue my story just a little bit more, it was a busy life for about 10 years performing as a family and as sisters. And then I was the first to get engaged, and then my sister Cherry, and our act had to slow down. We got married, we had kids, and the only one left still performing was my sister Debbie Boone, who you may also remember had a huge hit record, and it was called You Light Up My Life. And that was, I think, number one for 10 weeks on the charts. So it just built her career, and she is still singing and performing around the country. I married Doug Corbin, and we quickly formed a family with 2 children, a boy and a girl. Ryan came first, and then our daughter, Jessie. Sadly, our marriage only lasted about 7 years, but I'm happy to say our friendship and our co-parenting never stopped, and we're very close to this day. Later, I remarried, and Mike Michaelis and I, we had a child together, a son named Tyler, and that rounded out our family. Mike and I have been married for 37 years. So what does this have to do with TBI? Well, there is a TBI story in my family to tell, and I've asked Doug Corbin, Ryan's dad, and Mike Michaelis, my husband and Ryan's stepdad, to help me tell our TBI story. All TBI stories involve life interrupted. This is never the plan. And to me, our story has to include how it was before to explain the impact of this accident or any accident or a stroke or anything that's happened to the brain of a loved one. Our story involves an accident that Ryan had in 2001. And I want to tap into the 3 collective memories that we'll share with you today to be able to relive it here with you to some degree. Our story also involves a decision to start a nonprofit and to take the pain that we've been through and to reach out to the TBI community and see if we can help. And we called our nonprofit, we call it Ryan's Reach. In fact, I encourage you to go visit our website, ryansreach.com. That's no caps, no apostrophe, ryansreach.com. We've been raising money for 20 years. It's hard to believe it's been 20 years. And we've been using the funds to provide therapy for TBI survivors and equipment in support of High Hopes Head Injury Program in Tustin, California. In 2016, we were able to start our first group home for TBI in Tustin, and another one in 2019 in Santa Ana. This year, Ryan's Reach decided to jump into the podcast pool and have a digital reach and share not just our story, but share some of the fascinating, encouraging, and hopeful stories of people who have come across our paths. So I want to be perfectly clear here. I am not a TBI answer woman. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a therapist, and I don't have all the answers. Welcome back to TBI Talk. I'm Lindy Michaelis, Lindy Boone Michaelis, your host, and I'm going to be joined now by my husband, Mike Michaelis. Hi, honey. You there?
Hello, dear. You're looking better than ever.
So this is Ryan's stepdad, and he's been Ryan's stepdad since Ryan was about 9 years old. And I also want to introduce Doug. Let's bring him up. Doug Corbin, Ryan's dad.
Hey, Lindy.
Hello. Hi,
Hello,
guys. Now we can just get kind of informal and talk to each other. We do this all the time, but not in front of people on Zoom. Anyway, thank you so much for helping me tell this story and being willing to be real transparent and just make sure that I don't leave important things out. We all experienced it at the same time, but it was all different, unique experiences as we're unique individuals. So first, just Mike, I just want to mention Mike is my husband of 37 years, and I met him when I was an office manager working in law offices. So just say a little bit, honey, about yourself, just in 30 seconds or less.
30 seconds or less.
Okay, or a minute.
Well, it is correct. I ended up going through college and wasn't ready to take a job, so I decided to go on to law school and ended up becoming an attorney, which was never an initial goal that I was chasing growing up, but ended up liking it. Spent 45 years at least now being an attorney. I will say, with regard to the issue of brain injury and what happened to our son Ryan, I was fortunate enough that my first couple of years of practicing law, I was involved with personal injuries. I worked for a large law firm in downtown Los Angeles, and we represented persons that had been involved in car accidents, even falls, other types of incidents. So I was able to learn a lot of basics about law and insurance coverages and settlements and those type of issues, which ultimately came in to be a great benefit in
Absolutely.
the situation with Ryan.
Yeah, and Doug, give a little bit of background about yourself too, because I really do see this synergy of how we were all kind of uniquely prepared in life before this accident happened to Ryan. So little background on yourself.
Yeah, sure. Well, of course, you and I met at Pepperdine University. So I was played baseball on a scholarship at Pepperdine. That's where you and I met, Lindy. I went immediately into teaching. I taught in the inner city, and then I met a gentleman by the name of Mike Curb, who happened to
remember
be
him well.
Yeah, happened to be Lindy and her sisters and her dad's record producer, and he offered me a job. And I spent about 10 years in the music business. I dabbled a little bit in the insurance business for a while, but in 1983, I went to Africa with World Vision, and it really changed my life. And for the past 32 years, I've been involved working with charitable organizations, most notably Pepperdine University as an assistant vice chancellor there, and then more recently as the chief development officer at Children's Hospital of Orange County.
And reached your goal of retiring. And so how's that going?
It's not going well at all. I'm busier than I've ever been. And I know Mike can attest to that.
Yeah, just listening to you guys, I realized, wow, we sound old. All the things I've been doing this for 32 years, and my record was recorded 44 years ago.
Yeah.
Mike was an attorney for 45 years. So, but don't we look young and vital for all that? Yeah.
Is there a reason we're going into this area? I'm pretty sensitive.
Yeah. No, anyway, I feel like it tells a story that sometimes when things happen to you, even though it seems like we're blindsided, there has been a stage set. And I don't know what everybody's spiritual worldview might be, but it seemed to me that we were somehow tapped to not just go through what we were going through, but we could start a nonprofit based on some of the backgrounds that we've had. And it all worked together to take this brain injury experience and reach out to others. Before we get into the nonprofit, Doug, would you just talk about Ryan and what your feelings towards him, of course, as a dad, but then how you reacted to the news of his accident, and describe the accident? I haven't even talked about that yet.
Yeah, sure. Well, Ryan literally was the sweetest little boy I've ever encountered in my life. I know I'm prejudiced, but he was always smiling, always wanting to please, friendly to everybody, loving everybody. But as he grew older, I began to get a little concerned that he was a little bit soft. It was, and there was a need to toughen him up a little bit. And I can just share a quick story. I remember going to his basketball game when he was a freshman in high school, and he was sitting on the bench, and he was a starter. And I walked in and I sat down next to him on the bench, and I said, "Why aren't you playing?" And he said, "My toe hurts." And I was, "Your toe hurts?" I said, "You go over to the coach, you tell him you're ready to play, and you get in there." And he did. And he eventually became an all-league player, set a couple records in basketball for his high school and so forth, and just turned out to just be an incredible, incredible young man. You want me to share a little bit about the accident?
June 19th, 2001.
June
Changed our
19th,
lives.
2001. I remember, I turned 50 that year on June 7th. I ended up going to Maui with my best friend, Brad, and came back. And 2 days later, I was in my office. I was working for Pepperdine at the time. And it was our daughter, Jessica, calling saying Ryan's been in an accident and he's at UCLA. And I had no idea how bad it was. I mean, I just kind of said, okay, well, I'll get in the car and I'll come down. She didn't know much about it. And I remember going to UCLA in traffic, driving 2.5 hours or whatever it was, and getting there. And the first person I saw, Lindy, was your mom.
Mm-hmm.
And your mom came up to me and she looked at me and just went, "It's bad, honey." And that's when it hit me that I was entering into a place I'd never been before. And then the head nurse came in, and I'm very direct. And I asked the nurse, "Is he going to be okay?" And the look on her face told me that he wasn't going to be okay at that point in time. So that's my early, experience with it. And then, of course, he ended up being in a coma. I think, what was it, 4.5 months, Lindy?
Approximately 4 months. That's a thing where you expect people to wake up from a coma, and we learned sometimes it's a very gradual, hard to know when they're in and when they're out, when they wake up so slowly. Listen, I do need to take a break, so please let's put a pin in that and pick up the story on the other side. It's hard to interrupt these conversations, but we'll be right back, and we'll continue with Doug and with Mike in just a moment. And thanks for sticking around. We're back talking to Doug Corbin, Ryan Corbin's dad, talking about the time we heard about Ryan's accident. Did you mention that he had fallen through a skylight? I can't remember if we had even explained what happened to him.
No, I don't think we did. Do you want me to share that part, Lindy?
I'll just explain. He was
Yeah.
going up to the roof of his apartment building to get some sun, and he was with his roommate, thank goodness. But he stepped across the skylight and his foot came down on it, and he just disappeared through it. It did not bear his weight. He's a 6'4". He was about 210 pounds, and he fell 3 stories. And it was a catastrophic injury with his lungs collapsing, a skull fracture, some cracked ribs, burst spleen. So all those things weren't known by you when you got the call and you showed up and you were hearing dire predictions from the nurse. So if you want to just finish your thought where I interrupted you.
Well, the recollection is the amount of time. I think it was 42 days at UCLA, probably spending 12 to 14 hours a day in the waiting room, the family waiting room. And I remember, Lindy, that your dad and I and Mike in certain situations would be the ones talking to the doctors, getting reports, and then filtering the information in a way that everybody remained hopeful.
Yeah.
But it was dire. I mean, they first didn't know if he would even live. And then it was, well, if he does live, he'll be in a persistent vegetative state. And, but at every step, he just kept getting better. And miracles aren't confined to 100% recovery.
Yeah.
I consider what happened to Ryan and where he is today a miracle, because he knows us, he sees us, he recognizes us.
He talks.
He talks, he interacts, he laughs.
He's funny. Yeah.
He's funny, all of that. The one quick story I just wanted to share, and Lindy, you will remember this, is, I don't know if it was a week into it or what, but we were in his room in the ICU. It was just you and I. And I asked God to give us a sign that he was going to be okay. And I remember up to this point, he didn't move. He didn't move. And just as I said that, his leg twitched. His leg twitched. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And it was like, okay. Okay.
That was good.
That was a good thing to happen. But the last thing I'll share is how important it was that all of us, me, you, Mike, the kids, your parents, my parents, everybody just supported one another through this. This type of event can either draw you together or it can blow a family apart. And fortunately for us, it drew us even closer together. And I think one of the major reasons why we're all still so close today.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with all of that. It's seared into my memory, those days in the waiting room. Honey, Mike, it's your turn. I want to ask you to share what it was like for us, because we had a slightly different experience hearing about what happened to Ryan.
That's very correct. Unfortunately, we were on a wonderful vacation in Spain at the time, in Malaga. And it was in the middle of the night, and it was you and I and our son Tyler, the 3 of us. In the middle of the night, got the infamous phone call ringing, which never is good news when you get a call in the middle of the night. That's when your sister Debbie was calling and told you that Ryan had been involved in a very serious accident, that his condition was not really known, that he was in the emergency room being operated on. And there was really no choice. Immediately you said, we're going home. And even though I'm usually stubborn and like to fight about things like that, I immediately realized the importance of it. I then went into my organizational mode, I'll call it. I'm known for being far too organized. And I immediately put into operation how we were going to get back to the airport, how we were going to be able to purchase tickets. When we got to the airport, I was able to be smart enough to talk with customer relations people. Was able to receive a lot of special accommodations, some private rooms when we were staying in airports waiting to go to the next place. So very vivid memory of the horrific time we have coming back. I will mention that the flight itself was kind of a blur to me. I know that you have your own memories of your internal strife that you were going through in your thought process. To me, it was more than a blur. I mean, I think I was more in protection mode, just being concerned for you and Tyler at the time.
Right. Right. And then we got there, and as much as I wanted to get there to be with Ryan, it was so difficult to walk into the room and see him with every kind of tube and every kind of intervention. And he was swollen, and obviously didn't really look like himself, with part of his hair shaved. And it was a hard, and just it seared into my memory. And you walk into that and you have no idea what the outcome is going to be. You go into this kind of limbo life for a while. So that's really what happened. But you, being the lawyer and the brain that works in your head, you were thinking of some other things, even while we sat in the waiting room over those weeks.
Well, of course, it was very obvious that I was concerned about the steps that would be involved and the issues that would have to be taken care of. For example, I stepped into the shoes of Ryan, so to speak, in a couple of very specific ways. One, when we finally brought him home, I had to learn, it wasn't a problem, I was proud to do so, but learn to assist with his daily activities, whether it was bathing or lifting him or helping him eat or whatever. I mean, that was a new learning experience. Very happy to do it, and glad that I was, because now I'm still able to substitute at times when we have our current staff that cannot help him out, but they can step in. Also, being an attorney, I guess it was natural for me to get involved in his financial affairs, small minor things that had to be taken care of, like making sure that he doesn't get into problems with his credit card being dinged. A cute story was he actually got a notice of jury service that he was supposed to respond to, and so I was able to take care of that little minuscule thing. But there was just little things like that that did have to occur.
There's nothing minuscule about what you've done, by the way. You became his conservator, and you started the ball rolling when it came to us needing to look into whether or not who was at fault for that accident. And I remember that you hired an investigator and you kind of laid the groundwork for a settlement that has allowed us to take care of him. So do not minimize the role you played there.
There's a couple of things I want to observe about that. One, I look back at a lot of the records and stuff that I have kept, and you mentioned the fact that I had hired an investigator, and I couldn't remember that, but I had, and this was again God's hand working in a strange way. You know, Ryan being Pat's grandson, there was a lot of press coverage, and I'll never forget, I had received a call from a news organization, and the lady was writing an article about young college kids falling from buildings. And that happenstance, when she was calling to talk about Ryan, I had discovered that she'd actually had an expert on building codes and falls from buildings and so on that was part of her team to write this article. And that was the amazing ability. When I contacted that individual, he gave me tremendous insight into things that we should be looking about regarding laws and regulations and other situations involving the building. The other thing I want to tie into real quickly, again, you mentioned that, yes, I was his conservator and I am his conservator. I just want to mention, to the extent that anybody over age 18, I think that they should literally think strongly about getting powers of attorneys that they sign. Nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow, as we're living proof, or Ryan's living proof. But if you have at least a written power of attorney giving authority to other persons, then if an incident does happen, then the person with the power of attorney can act with all the authority the same they could as a conservator. And it saves a tremendous amount of burdens placed on persons in the future. So I highly recommend powers of attorney.
That's really, really good advice. We're going to take another break here shortly, but I do want to mention that during these early weeks, and actually for the first year and a half, we had the unusual experience being invited on Larry King Live. my dad, myself, and various other members of clergy, and Larry gave us a lot of attention, which brought a lot of attention to Ryan's accident. It brought a lot of attention to TBI. And that is why we were able to discuss and start Ryan's Reach. And I want to talk about that on the other side of this break, why we started Ryan's Reach. Okay, so we'll be right back. Well, welcome back again. I can't believe how fast this time has been going by. I want to just sort of wrap things up. After the initial shock of Ryan's accident, and we were involved for 1.5 to 2 years of kind of extreme existence and figuring out this world of TBI. And in future podcasts, we'll be sharing other stories of that. But suffice it to say that a lot of attention was given to us because my dad is a celebrity. And so it got a lot of publicity that other families might not have had. And while we considered that, it just seemed to me that as Ryan was improving, as we were rejoicing that he hit milestones of being able to eat or being able to read or being able to speak, which took a really long time. I mean, I didn't hear the sound of his voice till 15 months after his accident, and it took about 3 years before he started to string sentences together. So it's been a long journey, but during this period of time, we were so grateful that he was continuing to progress. And we had this platform, and we decided it wasn't just for our benefit that people were hearing about Ryan. We felt like we had a reason to reach out and help others. And so we did. We started Ryan's Reach. And the reach has to do with Ryan reaching to God, his family, to the medical community for his own recovery. But we know Ryan. Ryan is going to turn and reach to others and bring as many people along with him on that road to recovery. And that's what Ryan's Reach is about and for. So please visit ryansreach.com if you want to know more about our nonprofit. We really do have a heart for people with brain injury, and we want to share what we've learned. And in future podcasts, I'm going to be having guests that have some incredible stories, hopeful information, and mostly you don't want to walk through this alone. There's something just so helpful to know that you're not the only one that's ever gone through this. And for a while, that's how it feels. So we want to be here for you. And I hope you'll visit us on future podcasts. And as we end this particular podcast, I just want to introduce a video that my sister Debbie put together. And if you're only hearing it, you're going to hear her sing this beautiful song. It's called The Color of Roses. And if you're watching it, you'll see some amazing pictures of Ryan and his journey in that first 1.5 years. This has been a pleasure. I hope to see and be with you all again in the near future. Thanks for joining us.
I held you close to me once in a distant dream, far from the shores of my fear. I sailed on the ocean wave, all I imagined could happen, and now you are here. It's so hard to touch what is out of our hands, to know and to trust what the heart understands. Only the ones who believe ever see what they dream, ever dream. Life gives us happiness, life brings us tragedy. Everyone suffers some lows. Still, we have faith in it, childlike hope. There's a reason that outweighs the cost, and gravity throws all these rules in our way, and sometimes the spirit refuses to play. Only the ones who believe ever see what they dream, ever dream what comes true. Oh, love, turn me around in your arms, and in this dream we share, let us not miss one care. So add my regrets to the tears in the rain, for that's what the color of